Natasha Tracy. I am a speaker and writer.
Can you tell me a little bit about your own mental health journey?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder more than 20 years ago now, and it's been quite a bumpy ride, basically before, during, and after that process. So before that process, I did have mood episodes, but didn't know what they were, didn't know anything about bipolar disorder. And in fact, I was one of those people that didn't really believe in mental illness. I was brought up in a family that was told that, depression didn't really exist and those people just needed to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and that antidepressants were just happy pills for people who couldn't handle their own lives. So I was in a very bad place when I saw a psychiatrist because I was full of misinformation. When I did finally go and see a psychiatrist, it was only because I felt that my life was in danger. And so I saw someone, and basically they diagnosed me incorrectly initially with just depression. This is very common in people with bipolar disorder. And unfortunately, it took about a year for them to figure out that that was wrong. And that was in spite of the fact that I actually came to them and said, I think it's bipolar disorder. But the guy wouldn't listen to me, as is so often the case with doctors and patients. What ended up happening was that psychiatrist went on summer vacation. I got a new psychiatrist, and the new psychiatrist actually listened to me, and we went forward with a bipolar diagnosis correctly. Now, after that, it was still not an easy ride. Trying to get something that worked was very difficult for me. It took years for me to find a medication that was successful. And in fact, the only reason I found something that was successful was mostly because my psychiatrist actually took a guess. He guessed on a medication that wasn't currently being used to treat bipolar disorder, and it actually worked for me. It was my particular miracle. So that was a goodly number of years ago now, and things have been rocky as I have gotten used to that medication. I've grown a tolerance to it and have had to find new medications as I've gone along. But I am here today, and I am doing the best I can to be as well as I can every day.
So, with your story, what inspired you to become a mental health advocate and help others?
Yeah, so I wasn't planning on it. Basically, when I was 25 years old, I met a guy, right? So this is all about a guy. And I thought he was really cute, and he was a writer. And so one day I had the flu, and I was at home, and I read a whole bunch of his work. He had a blog that had gone on for years. And so I read it, and I thought to myself, that's kind of cool. I think I can do that. I think I can write just like that. And that was just hubris on my part because I'm not actually a trained writer. But I started, and it turned out I was pretty good at it. And so, of course, I wrote about my journey with bipolar disorder pretty much every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. I just became addicted to writing, if you like. And so basically, when that was happening, very few people read my work because I was anonymous on the internet, and that was okay with me. I was mostly just trying to get my own experience out there. I wasn't really trying to attract readers per se. But at some point, someone who was reading my work said to me, you're saving lives, right? And I did not believe him. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And basically, I didn't think that anything I could write would actually help anyone else. I was just talking about me. But it was sometime thereafter when a reader actually wrote to me and said that I had saved her life, that she wanted to take her life one night and she didn't because of some things that I had written. And it was at that point that I realized that what I did have a broader impact than just getting my words out on paper. So it was at that point that I realized that it was important. What I did was important. Now, actually becoming a professional advocate was something that I didn't do for years until years after that, until I decided to not be anonymous, until I decided to become a professional and I started writing for other sites, etc. And that only happened actually because I got laid off from a corporate job. I got laid off and I couldn't find another job. And a friend of mine who was a writer said to me, you should be a writer. And I said, I can't be a writer. I don't know anything about being a writer. He said, it's really easy. All you do is print up a business card that says writer on the front of it. So I did that. And then I started applying for gigs, and I was extremely lucky that a website called healthyplace.com picked me up and asked me to start writing for them. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about, books you've worked on and all through that process?
Sure. So I have written more than 2,000 articles on bipolar disorder that
Wow.
are online right now. So there is literally nothing that I don't know about the illness. I've literally been researching it for more than 20 years. So in 2016, I wrote my first book about bipolar disorder. So it's called Lost Marbles: Insights into My Life with Depression and Bipolar. And that particular book was really designed to take some of the best of what I had written and put it together in a format that I thought would really help people, because not everyone wants to sit in front of their computer and scroll through a bunch of blog articles. Not to mention the fact that in a book, you have a chance to put things together in a more formal, professional way, which is what I did. Now, that book was quite successful. I'm extremely proud of the work that went into that book. Not only was I able to address some taboo subjects such as suicidality and things like the insight that you can get from mental illness and how that actually can bring you a certain awakening. So not only was I able to touch on those types of subjects, but I was also able to provide people with a treatment algorithm. So what that basically is something that tells people how to treat bipolar disorder. So for example, when you have bipolar disorder, your first line treatments are going to be these 3 items. If that fails, then you're going to want to do this. If that fails, then you're going to want to do that. That's a treatment algorithm. And the reason why I supplied that to the readers, and I did it for both bipolar depression, unipolar depression as well. And I did that because it's really important that patients walk into their doctor's office with some knowledge with them, because sometimes patients feel like they're at the end of the road when really they're not. And if they were to just look at the algorithm, they would see there are 7 more steps that could be taken to help them. And if their doctor is saying that there isn't, they need a new doctor. So it empowers patients to walk into an appointment and say, I know that this and this and this have failed, but I'd really like to try this, whatever it is. And then they can have a discussion with their doctor about whether it's right for them or not. So it was a really powerful book for me, and I think the readers to come to that kind of empowerment together. And then actually early next year, I'm going to be releasing a second book, and it's called Bipolar Rules: Hacks to Live Successfully with Bipolar Disorder. This book is a little bit different. So the idea with this book is to give people sort of clear-cut rules to live by so that they can live successfully. You know, so many of us have heard tips and tricks online, and that's okay. Lots of them are very good. But this book aims to really separate the wheat from the chaff and say, here are the serious rules that will work for you and you can live by. And of course, not every rule is for every person, but what we've got here is a series of rules that are really going to help you get a handle on your bipolar disorder. Because yes, of course, medical treatment is extremely important and you absolutely need to be doing that. But there's a whole raft of other things that you need to be doing as well if you want to live successfully with this kind of illness.
And I live with bipolar disorder too, and just hearing your story makes me feel better because it's relatable. Do you see when you share your story, people do feel that relatability?
100%. You know, it's really, so there's a truth. And the truth is this: when you write about the specific about you, it becomes general for other people. In other words, no matter what you are going through in your treatment, I promise you, other people are going through it too. So for example, I had electroconvulsive therapy a few years ago and it didn't work for me. Now, this was a huge blow, as many people consider that to be a last-ditch attempt at being well. And so what do you do when the last-ditch effort doesn't work? Now, many people are actually in that situation and they may feel that they're at the end of the road, but I'm here to tell them they are not. There are many, many other people who have had that experience and they've come through it out the other side. So, yes, people absolutely identify with no matter what I talk about. When I talk about the fact that I have a really difficult time washing my hair, with the fact that I talk about, how difficult it is for me to sleep, when I talk about, any number of things that the bipolar has brought into my life, how I grieve the life that I would have had without bipolar disorder, and so on and so forth. People write to me every single day and say, thank you. I thought I was the only one. And you're definitely not.
What do you do to help your own mental health?
So the number one thing that I think that people with bipolar disorder can learn to improve their own lives is to maintain a strong sleep schedule. This is a piece of advice that people do not like, right? People don't
No.
want to maintain a sleep schedule. People don't want to do that. They don't want to say, I'm going to bed at 10 p.m. every single night, no matter what. Weekend, weekday, doesn't matter. That's what I'm doing. But that is my piece of advice for people. It works for me very well in that it is, you can think of bipolar disorder as a circadian rhythm disorder. Many doctors actually have put it in those terms because we have a really hard time regulating the rhythms of our lives. That's what moods come from. And so we need to regulate those things as best as we possibly can. And the biggest one we can regulate is our sleep. So what I do, of course, is I go to bed at the same time every night. I wake up at the same time every morning, and I work very hard to make sure that that happens. So for example, I have really good sleep hygiene. So I have a routine that I follow before bed that gets my brain into the space of saying, okay, now we're going to sleep. I do have sleeping medication that I find very important that may or may not be a part of anyone else's plan. I have a cool bedroom, I have a dark bedroom, I have a comfortable bed, et cetera, et cetera. So I've put all these pieces into place to facilitate my own sleep because I really believe that it is the number one key to wellness for people with bipolar disorder. And I can tell you that when a mood starts coming on, the fact that I'm following that sleep routine the way that I am actually can help quell that mood right at the beginning before it starts getting out of control.
Yeah, that's one of the big things that is my challenge is sleep, and then you add naps, and it's just all over the place.
Yeah, people are all different, but I think it's a truism that no one likes that advice.
Exactly. So what are some of the things that motivate you?
Yeah, motivation is a tricky thing. So I do suffer from a lot of depression, and of course, with depression, you lack motivation. That's just a normal
Right.
part of depression. It's a symptom. It's very, very common. So it's not like I wake up in the morning raring to go with this intrinsic motivation that says I have to do X, Y, and Z. I don't do that. No, it's more like I feel a sense of I feel that what I do is important for me, but also for other people. And there is a certain driving force behind that. I have always said to myself, I want to help one person, just one. That's all I want to do. Because I think that when an advocate becomes an advocate and they go out and they start doing their work, they think they're going to change the system. They think they're going to change the world. They think they're going to change a group, whatever they're going to do. Well, maybe they will. I don't know. But what I do know is that when you start doing that, when you start making that your bar, it starts to become impossible. So I never do that. I say to myself, I'm going to help one person today. The work that I do is going to help one person. And that really works for me. So it works for me to come out and say, this work is important because there is one person out there that is counting on me to say, etc., whatever it is that I'm going to say that day, whatever I say on social media or whatever I write about on my blog or whatever, what I'm saying on this podcast, for example, there's going to be someone who their life may actually be impacted by what I do that day. That can give you motivation.
What would you say to anyone going through a tough time right now?
Yeah. So, if you have bipolar disorder, I would wager that every single one of us have had really rough times. And, when I say that, someone without bipolar disorder doesn't really have any idea of what I mean. When I say tough time, I mean life-threatening time. Approximately 11% of people with bipolar disorder lose their lives to suicide. That means bipolar disorder is a lethal illness, and we need to
Yeah.
treat it as such because our bad times aren't bad times. Our bad times are the end of times for some of us. So it's really critical that when we do have those times, we take them very seriously and that the people around us take them very seriously. And if you're having a bad time right now, the first and most important thing you can do is reach out. Many of us, myself included, often want to cocoon when we're having a really difficult time. I want to go in bed and throw the covers over my head, and that's it. I want to hide, and I never want to talk to anyone again, and that's it. Well, that's not a useful coping strategy. A useful coping strategy is to have a list of people that you've determined ahead of time and say, these are the people that I need to reach out to when I start to become unwell. So, for example, friends and family members, those are very important members of your team, but of course, also your healthcare members of your team. You absolutely need to reach out to your nurse practitioner or your psychiatrist or whoever's treating you. Because what I always tell people is it's much easier to stop a mood when it's this big than when it's this big. So don't wait until your depression or your mania or whatever is off the scale. That's not helpful to you. You want to try and get a hold of it when it's very small and when only a small medication adjustment might be all you need. You don't want to wait until what you need is a hospitalization. That's the opposite of what you're trying to do here. You're trying to get yourself in a healthy position as quickly as possible and maintain your wellness as much as possible. And you do that by don't wait till your next doctor's appointment. Call your doctor up and say, look, this is what's happening for me. And I know that these are the signs that I'm going into a depression right now. Do that and make sure you do it every time. And if you have trouble reaching out, like I said, make a list of people who support you and stick it on the fridge and say to yourself, these are the people I'm going to call when I start to become unwell. Because when we do become unwell, when we are having a hard time, it's really difficult for us to implement healthy coping techniques. That's why so many of us turn to alcohol and drugs and many other things, because those healthy coping techniques are harder to do. So before you become unwell, put systems into place that are going to make using those healthy coping techniques easier for you. And if you're going through a hard time, please remember this. There is always an other side. I know it feels like there isn't. I know it feels like you're going to be there forever. Depression lies to you and tells you you will be there forever. Mania can lie to you and tell you that the world is against you. But you have to remember that that is your brain telling you lies, and you are smarter than that. You know the truth, and the truth is there is an other side to whatever you're going through. It may not be easy to find that other side. It may not be easy to get to that other side, but I promise there is one, and people want to help you get there.
Well said. Uh, so, where do you want to see your mission, say, in the next 3 to 5 years?
Hmm. That is a bit of a tricky one. I've never been much of a planner. I blame it mostly I blame it mostly on the mindfulness thing, which is that I tend to focus on the here and now, which I find easier with an illness rather than trying to look at far distances down the road. Just for me, it's a simpler thing to do. But
Yeah.
obviously, right now, I'm working on a book that will come out next year. So that's the first milestone that I'm looking to get to. But in 3 to 5 years, I think what I would like to see is more corporate speaking in my portfolio. So I'd really like to speak to more companies about workplace mental health, about mental illness in the workplace. I'm doing topics right now that are pretty exciting, like that combine AI and mental health in the workplace, things like that. So I'd really like to see more corporations in my portfolio that way, so that I can sort of spread this knowledge, not just to the people with bipolar disorder in our community that I love very dearly, but also to the corporate world at large, because people with mental illness don't just live in caves. We live in the workplace. And so we deserve to have good quality information about mental illness and mental health there too.
I agree with that because I worked at a corporation and that was not a good experience.
Yeah, I worked at a really large tech company, and while there were many things that it did well, and it did take wellness overall seriously, there
Yeah.
certainly wasn't any information about mental illness. And in fact, I knew of an employee there who actually got shunned because people assumed he had bipolar disorder. He didn't say he did. There wasn't any information that he did. It turned out he did. But it was something that people assumed about him. And he actually had to leave the company in order to restore his career because that was the word that was out about him. That is the worst case scenario for anyone with a mental illness, no matter what it is. I never want to see that happen to another person again as long as I live.
How can people reach out to you and learn more?
Well, there are lots of ways people can reach out to me because I'm everywhere. My website is natashatracy.com, and you can find out more about my new book at bipolarrules.com. And then, of course, I am all over social media like Facebook and Instagram. You will find me in all those places. And I encourage people to drop me a note either on social media, or there's a contact form directly on my website and they can get a hold of me there. While I can't respond to all of the mail that I get because I do get quite a bit, I do try to respond to as much as I can. So please don't hesitate to contact me if there is something you'd like clarification on or maybe a bit of help.